Welcome to Queen's Bench. In today's episode, we're thrilled to bring you insights from two exceptional lawyers, Cheryl Biehler and Sarah Turney. Cheryl Biehler is co-chair and the Assistant Director of Recruitment and Student Development at Fasken's Toronto office. With a robust background in litigation and a passion for mentoring, Cheryl shares her journey from law school to becoming a pivotal part of Fasken's professional development team. She provides a comprehensive look at the diverse pathways available within legal careers. Sarah Turney specializes in municipal and real property litigation and is also co-chair of the student committee. She was recognized as a Rising Star Leading Lawyer Under 40 by Lexpert. Sarah shares her experience navigating the legal profession and the journey that led her to her current role. In this episode, we dive deep into the 2L Bay Street Toronto recruitment process, exploring the ins and outs of securing a position at a top firm. Both Sarah and Cheryl offer invaluable advice, share their personal experiences, and provide tips on how to stand out in the highly competitive Bay Street recruitment scene. Join us as we explore their unique legal journeys, insights, and advice for aspiring lawyers. Whether you're a law student, a practicing lawyer, or simply interested in the legal world, this episode promises to be an enlightening and engaging listen. So grab your headphones and get ready to dive into the legal universe with a touch of humor and passion on Queen's Bench.
Welcome to the Queen's Bench podcast. Before we jump in, be sure to check us out on our website at queensbench.ca and make sure to follow us on all of your favorite social media and audio platforms. Now let's get started.
This is a particularly exciting podcast for me because I'm actually back at the firm I landed at, Fasken. So, it's exciting not only because I belong to this family now, but also because my experience with you guys was so positive. And I'm sort of hoping to convey that to, all the prospective 2Ls looking at this. So yeah, let's just dive right in. And I guess the first thing would be, obviously from our side of it, it's very, going into it, stressful. Depending on what background you have, it can be a puzzle like that you don't even have any insight how to solve. So what's it like from your side? Obviously our side, it's got huge personal and professional ramifications, whichever decision you make. And if you're in a position to choose which firm you want to end up at. But for you guys, I imagine it's extremely stressful too. You're selecting your upcoming crop of lawyers. So what's it like from your side of it going into the process?
Well, it's exciting. That's the first word that comes to my mind because although it's a lot of work for many people within the firm, it's also exciting every year. It's hugely important for us as well because this is one of the most important ways that we can attract and hire talent for our firm. So it is very exciting every year when we get to meet the new group of candidates who would potentially apply to our firm and then potentially be hired to join our team here. So, there are moments where, the process itself is very busy and certain parts of it, there's a lot of activity condensed into a very short period of time. So it can be intense for us too, but nothing like for the students who are, putting themselves out there. And, obviously it's more stressful for you guys.
When you see 2,000 or however many applications come across your desk, is it like overwhelming before OCIs, or does that hit a little bit later when you start having to make hard decisions?
I would say that the part of the process that I find the most stressful is that initial resume review. And the reason is because I do recognize that the decisions that we are helping to make are going to shape people's opportunities. And we will get, as you say, hundreds of applicants, and hundreds of them are fabulous. Like that's what makes it so hard, is the decisions do come down to tiny differences between application packages. And I know I feel this way. I know Cheryl feels this way. I know all of our reviewers understand that we have a really important kind of job to do through that process, and we do our best to do it well. But that part's stressful. It is.
Yeah. Going into the recruit week, do you guys have the expectation that you're going to get to sleep, or is that something that's a bit more of an afterthought?
The actual in-firm week,
Yeah.
I slept more when my child was a newborn, okay, than I do when we do the in-firm recruit. There is a lot that goes on behind the scenes to hopefully make the recruit run smoothly for the candidates, for the lawyers. I mean, it's still an operating law firm while the recruit is going on. And so we have to work around changing schedules. I mean, that's a side of it that we try to not let the candidates see, but we will have, with the best of intentions, set up 100 interviews, and then 10 of those lawyers will have a client emergency, and someone will need to change their schedule, and one thing will affect 10 other things. And that's the part that ends up, behind the scenes taking a lot of time. But ultimately, it is worth every minute we spend because we end up with this great crop of students at the end of the process.
The planning point there is a good one. How far in advance do you start planning around your clients and this process sort of together? Is that something that you do take into account, or you're not really able to because?
Yeah. I mean, all of the practicing lawyers who are a part of the process are told well in advance what the dates are. Mm-hmm. Cheryl and Cheryl's team put it in everyone's calendars months and months and months in advance. And for those that are really an active part of the recruit, yes, I try to schedule around things. I try to make sure I don't book meetings. But ultimately, if a client has an emergency and they come to us, like I've got to attend to that. Yeah. So, we do our best, but things. Well, Cheryl could attest to this better than me. The sands shift. Yeah.
So before we do, you talked about you have to make these really tough decisions because there are so many good applicants. Before we go to the applicants themselves, how did you guys come to be so involved with the process in the first place?
Well, now it's my job, my full-time job, but I started at the firm as a 2L summer student myself. That's awesome. And articled here, and I went on to become a litigation associate. So while I was an associate in the litigation group, I became very involved with student recruitment because it was something I really just enjoyed. So I got involved with, doing some, speaking to student groups and helping out with OCIs here and there. And also, came to mentor quite a few students as well in my practice. It was just something I really, really enjoyed. And then I actually joined the student development committee at that time. So after that period, I took a break from my practice when I had my kids and spent 8 years at home with my young kids. Came back to the firm in the role that I'm in right now, which is assistant director of recruitment and student development. So now I spend full time focusing on our student programs and our recruitment. So it felt like, even though I didn't go directly from one to the other, it felt like a very natural fit and like something I would really enjoy.
And in retrospect, do you feel like that was always sort of like gonna be a good fit for you?
I do. Yeah. You were meant for this role.
I was gonna say, it seems to fit your personality traits very well. So is that something you had ever considered in the past, or you came into it pretty naturally?
I didn't think of it in such an intentional way. Like this was a goal that, I set, like I want to be doing this 10 years from now kind of thing. But in terms of enjoying the work and sort of seeing that there were professionals in this firm and other firms who did this, as their full-time career, it was certainly something that I looked at and thought, gee, I would probably really enjoy that. And the fact that I'm doing the job here at this firm has a lot to do with why it seems like a natural fit and why I do get so much fulfillment out of it. That seems very natural that, as someone who's, I've been the beneficiary of, the programs we have here, the mentorship we have here. And so it's very natural for me to want to, number one, continue those programs and continue to make them, what they are, but also to try to express to others like yourself, that this is a great place for a student to start their career.
And on the other side of it, as an active lawyer, while simultaneously being involved in the program, how do lawyers decide if do they decide, or is it something that they're chosen for to participate in student recruitment?
So first you determine whether you're a bit of a masochist. There are a lot of ways to sort of give back to the firm and contribute to the management of the firm, the organization of the firm. We've got a series of committees that people can sit on. But I could not think of something that I would be more passionate about than the student recruitment process, because this is how we hire our future leaders. This is how we hire my future partners. This is how we're going to ensure the success of the firm. I mean, the firm in its original form, okay, because Fasken is the result of multiple mergers and firms coming together. But in its original form, this is older than the country. And so I feel like a real sense of commitment to helping the firm continue to be great. And we are comprised of our lawyers. And so the better we hire and the better we train, the better we will do.
That's amazing. How many lawyers are involved in the process altogether?
So directly, how many are on the student committee?
I think we're around 15.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they would be sort of, we'll call those sort of the hub. And the student committee are the ones that are kind of the most involved in kind of the day-to-day sort of training and ensuring that students get the best kind of overall experience at the firm, and ensuring that feedback is processed and given back to students in an effective way. Like, they're really kind of the core. But from there, we have lawyers that work as mentors. We have lawyers that act as principals. All of the practice group leaders are involved in student development. And then we have our management that's involved in student development. So overall, I mean, in the Toronto office, it's probably realistically people that are actively involved, 100, 110 lawyers, something in that sort of range. But we want every one of our lawyers to be involved with the students. And I think for the most part, most people are.
I would say that point really hit home at the reception event on the second day of the recruit. The reception room was so full, and it wasn't just students. It was, I mean, as many lawyers as you could pack in the room. And it was sort of interesting to see how much interest the lawyers at the firm did have for the incoming crop. So I thought that was really, really cool.
I'm very glad that you perceived it that way, because it's something that I was very proud of the way that reception came off, because it was the first time we had done it in years, because we had that reception for a very long time. Then the pandemic that will not be named took place, and we weren't able to host it for a long time. So then we had it back, and I, like you, sort of walked around and was very proud of the fact that our lawyers, all came out. All came out. It's very different from other receptions in that, sometimes you get a reception, it's a select group of people that are permitted to go or participate. This is everybody. Like, we're not hiding anybody in a closet. This is the whole thing. And you can see how our lawyers interact with each other and how truly interested everybody is in meeting the students and helping the candidates and helping people that they've met work that room and talk to people. Yeah, so I'm glad you saw it that way, because that's how I felt too.
When I came to that room, I was filled with so much adrenaline and excitement, and I think it was because you have, I mean, so many people there. It's you can tell it almost gives you the sense that, oh, this is a pretty big deal, and I'm pretty privileged to be here right now, and I mean, that's a good feeling.
That reception was one of the reasons that made me pick Fasken when I had to decide which firm to go to, because as a candidate, I just got a really good feeling being in that room that the people who were there really wanted to be there and that they genuinely were interested in talking to me, but also like being with one another, and I liked that.
That's a really good point too. They weren't just there almost passively. They had clearly been, I don't think they were all on the student committee. I think people had read cover letters for themselves almost for fun, and they were familiar with different students and everything like that. And that was extremely eye-opening. I mean, it suggests that they take such a special interest in the process. And I mean, I think that speaks really highly of the firm. So you mentioned that you did the process in 2L. Has it changed at all? And are there any changes that you would maybe like to see? Maybe spread it out over more time so you could sleep a little bit.
Well, that's something I've thought of, because you could look at the way other markets run their recruitment, like in Ottawa, for example, theirs isn't condensed in a 3-day period, right? The interviews are spread out over a couple of weeks. And, you can kind of think, that sounds nice, right? Like having a little more spread out. But then at the same time, as Sarah was talking about earlier, so many, lawyers, billing professionals are, setting aside, to the extent they can, their practices, their clients. Like, it becomes very difficult, I think, for people to do that over an extended period of time. So I don't know. I think a lot of people have given some thought to the way the process runs, especially because the pandemic period was a bit of not a wake-up call, but like a bit of a shift, right? Because we were forced to do things differently. All of us, I mean, in the market, right, of the employers, we were forced to do things completely differently than we had done before. We had to go completely online. Big receptions were not possible, like all that kind of stuff. And not that anybody, I think, wants to go back to having it be totally virtual, but you kind of think like the way things have always been done for a long time, do they necessarily have to be done that way? So I think that, there are a lot of different employers with different, factors that they would consider to be important. And it becomes tricky to, try to make sure that the process as it rolls out is going to be, somewhat easy for the students to navigate. You can't have, some over here doing it this way and some over there doing it that way, right? How are you guys supposed to navigate that? So I think that it's probably going to stay as a 3-day process in Toronto, only because that's the way it's always been, and changing that would be incredibly difficult, I would imagine.
It's kind of funny too, and speaking with friends back at Queen's, going into the process is extremely daunting, but coming out of it, you're actually super grateful that it was the way that it was. Being condensed, it's stressful for a very short amount of time, but it's not dragged out. You sort of have, what approach to take going forward, and and it's also it's a cool experience to come out of. It is a pretty unique thing that you'll probably never do again. So, I mean, there's a credit almost to be had just for making it through.
For sure. And that's certainly the other side of it, is like now I've been out of school for a while. And so I forget that like at the time, you also have classes. And some of the schools don't suspend the classes during the recruit. So it does make a lot of sense that it's a pretty condensed process. It's sort of rough on this end, but it's almost impossible to do otherwise if you're at a school outside the city where you're seeking employment. Because you've got to travel, you've got to commit all that time. I was at Ottawa when I was applying to the Toronto process, and you're missing classes, you're missing, lectures. You can't do that for very long. So I agree. I think we're probably, it's not a perfect process, but I think it's a process that works given all of those factors.
And like you just said too, if you're not from Toronto, you need to find accommodation. And if you have to find accommodation for 2 weeks, it's obviously, it can almost be prohibitive. So, all right, on to the student side of things. At each, I guess we'll go stage by stage. What are you looking for, say, right at the beginning in OCIs? Or even to select people for OCIs, what are you looking for in applications at the very first stage?
I vote that you start and I supplement.
Okay, what are we looking for at the application stage? Well, as Sarah has already said, it's very difficult with the number of applications we receive, many of which are excellent applications. I mean, we're looking for somebody who really seems to want to be here. And what I mean by that is, somebody who can really communicate that they have the skills that it takes and the desire to be in an environment like this, right? And more specifically, why do they want to work with us? So we look for that. We look for somebody to have at least, tailored their application so that we can tell, they truly have an interest in our firm specifically, and also have they packaged their, their experience, and are they highlighting the kinds of things that are of interest to us, things that we know will make a student successful in our environment. So things like, just being very, very motivated, very hardworking, that can come through in a number of ways, right? When we're looking at someone's overall application, it can come through because they've held a specific role or type of job where that was required of them, and so they can point to that. Or it can come through in just, the range of things that they've undertaken, all at once. You can see someone who's very motivated to do things, to contribute, to create something, to solve a issue, to help others, like whatever it is, right? But you get this sense of someone who's hardworking, they're motivated, there's someone who's going to take initiative. That's the kind of person who can come into here and really be successful, right? We look for people who have a client service mindset, because this is a place where client service is of the utmost importance. And so, people who seem to understand that that's part of this job, right? If you're applying to private practice, you're going to be required to, use those client service skills. So we look for that. We look for people who have had the chance to work in team settings, because that's part of how we operate here is we collaborate. We work as a team. Our students are very much part of those teams, and we're looking for team players who want to contribute to that kind of culture. Yeah. So those are a few things that we're looking for. Now it's your turn to
wait. I have nothing to add. You did that perfectly. I have nothing to add.
I do have a follow-up.
Sure.
How much do your grades dictate how you're perceived? And how much can your experiences cover for average grades?
Good.
Because there's a lot of disinformation and myths about that. So I want to clarify it.
Okay. So I, like Cheryl, have reviewed resume packages for many years. I have absolutely selected students with a lower GPA who have a better overall package than someone with straight A's. I do it every year. I do it with multiple candidates because it is one thing to have straight A's, but that is clearly the one thing you had to deal with versus someone who has some Bs, someone who has a lower average, but they've worked, they've volunteered, they've participated in various things. Because when you work in private practice, like, look, to make it into law school, you are smart. I already know that. You are academically inclined. I already know that. To work in private practice, you have to juggle many things at the same time. You have to juggle different client demands. You have to, in a day, you might have 2 clients with serious bet the farm competing priorities, and you have to figure out a way to balance them both. Eventually, you might have family commitments and your professional career and who knows what else. Yeah. I need people who can multitask. I need people who can figure out how to prioritize and then execute on those priorities. I will discount straight A's, where that is really all I'm seeing in that package, over someone with a lower GPA who has all of those well-rounded skills.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I mean, there's a myth. I don't know if it's real or not, but I just keep hearing it, especially in 1L, that a gold medalist from a UFT didn't end up landing on the Bay Street Recruit. And it's like a warning, like, hey, make sure you're also like being well-rounded and doing the extracurriculars and stuff. I did think some people were overburdening themselves. Like, I think you need to find a balance where you're volunteering and starting a podcast.
Exactly.
and doing that kind of stuff, but also, like, it is law school, it is grueling, like, you need to study 5-6 hours a day. It's just, there's no way around it. But it's very refreshing to hear that you guys are considering that, and it's not just like a go down the transcripts, filter by GPA, and cut out the lowest ones and move on. It would be easier.
It'd be a lot faster to get through the application.
Automate it and call it a day.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's immensely important to us that we have that our future lawyers are people who are going to be able to, as Cheryl said, serve our clients well. That doesn't just mean you were the most academically inclined. Not by that is one factor of many factors. Your ability to talk to someone is immensely important. I can be the smartest person on the planet. If I cannot explain the concepts to my client, I'm of very little value to them. And so I need someone who can communicate well, who can demonstrate that they're interested in people, that they're interested in helping, that they're interested in being in a team. And if you demonstrate that in your overall resume package, I am more interested in you than I am in the gold medalist.
You spoke about showing a specific interest in Fasken. How would you recommend applicants go about doing that? Is it coffee chatting lawyers at the firm? Is it coming in person to meet with members of the team? What would you say is the best way for students doing their applications to show a specific interest in this firm?
It can be that, although it doesn't necessarily have to be that. We interview a lot of people who didn't necessarily, meet with us on coffee chats. That's certainly one way for you as a candidate to learn something about the firm so that you can genuinely come to us and say, I am interested in Fasken because, like, whatever that reason is. I think we just want, as most firms do, want to know, because, as we've talked about, like, we are approaching the recruitment process with a view to hopefully, hiring people who can become the future of our firm. And we really want to feel from the candidates that they are also approaching it in a similar way, right? Not to say, like, if you sign up to be a summer student here, it's set in stone for the rest of your life. That's not what I mean. But just, you're taking it seriously and you're looking at firms with a view to choosing a place where you can launch your career. And so we assume that, if you're taking that seriously, that you would know something about this firm versus the other firm that is leading you to want to focus your attention on us and want to be part of our team. So I think coffee chats and attending firm tours and open houses are an excellent way for candidates to gather the kind of information that you would need to try to sort through, if there's X number of firms out there I can apply to, which are the ones that I think at this stage and with the information that's available to me, which are the ones that are really appealing to me for whatever the reasons are that you have, right? It doesn't have to be the same for everybody. And it's not like we're looking for some magic words, like you have to say you like this about us or that about us, or you talk to this specific person. It's just give us something to indicate that you've thought about this and like what's standing out to you about our firm.
So I have two questions. Number one, can you guys see in the 2L recruit how many firms somebody applied to and what firms they applied to? Or do you just see that they applied to Fasken?
We do not see that.
Okay.
No.
Other question. Let's say you're a 1L and you're listening to this. How different are the Bay Street firms from one to the other? Such that could you be a bad fit for Fasken or a good fit for Fasken, but be a bad fit or a good fit somewhere else?
Lord, yes. That is such a good question.
Okay.
The firms have very different personalities. Okay, now that I have been practicing since dinosaurs roamed the earth, I have interacted with many of my colleagues at various firms, and the firms have personalities. They do. And one of the reasons for that, by the way, it's not even that like nothing untoward is happening here. When we try to put together, when we put together a student group, and I'm sure all of the firms are doing the same thing, while we are absolutely not trying to put together a homogeneous group, we are trying to put together a group that will be cohesive. Mm-hmm. So whatever values we have as a firm, we're looking for those values in our candidates so that when they come together, they will get along with each other. So we don't want people to be elbows up against each other. We don't want friction in our firm. To introduce friction makes no sense, right? Yeah. So generally speaking, I won't even say if, Fasken values teamwork. Okay, that is a important value for us. Because of that, you could be the best candidate on 10 metrics. If we can tell that you will throw a team member under a bus, we're not interested. That doesn't mean, though, that not every firm is interested. Mm-hmm. There are firms who will value productivity over teamwork, okay, as an example. There are firms that will value, some characteristics over others. Mm-hmm. And I can see that in my colleagues. There are some firms that have a personality different than ours, generally. We're a huge place. I think we're 800 lawyers at this point internationally. So you can find every personality type somewhere in this firm, as you can with any of the large firms. But there is an overall kind of corporate personality that would make you, for the most part, fit better one place than another. And that's one of the reasons we encourage candidates to talk to and get to know the alumni who have been at a firm, because they're going to be able to tell you a little something about what it's like to be there. Is this a high energy place? Is this an open door kind of place? Is this a competitive environment? And then you can ask yourself, what kind of environment do I want to be in to grow as a lawyer? Mm-hmm. There are differences, but the only way you're really going to get to know those differences is to visit, talk to alumni, talk to lawyers, because you can't tell from the website. From the website, we all look exactly the same.
I couldn't agree with you more. The intangible character of the firm, I mean, ultimately it is what led to me wanting to be here versus anywhere else. It was abundantly apparent, and I mean, very superficially outside looking in, and I know you didn't do the 2L recruit for Toronto, so it's actually a really good question. I could understand why someone might think, oh, every firm looks pretty similar, especially if you are only consulting the websites. As soon as you get here, I think the differences, I mean, the longer you're here, the more apparent they become. But the other thing that sort of speaks to that point that I think Fasken does do really well is the pairing of candidates with hosts, because the host is sort of like a window into the firm, because at that point you're still an outsider, obviously, and the experience with your host, in my case, you guys actually couldn't have picked someone better than Arjun. Shout out Arjun, he's amazing. It was incredibly telling. So I would say you definitely can tell outside looking in what different firms, what their characters are almost.
Yeah, exactly.
As you go into OCIs, the next stage of the process, you have these, 17, but more like 20-minute interviews. What are you looking for? Are you looking for just someone who's comfortable speaking with people, someone who has a lot of substance behind their experiences? What is it you're looking for at the OCI stage?
So we're looking for, we've started in the last number of years to be a little more standardized in terms of the questions that we ask in our OCIs. Like, it's not just a free range conversation where we'll just see where it takes us. It's always going to be, the anchor is always going to be your resume and your experience. And, we're going to, want to know more about what you've told us in your application. But we also want to ask some questions of each and every candidate that day that allows them to, really kind of illustrate some of those competencies that we're looking for. So, we'll have 2 or 3 questions that we will ask every candidate that day during the OCIs. It's still going to feel very conversational. We don't want it to be overly formal, very conversational, and we want to see that you're able to engage with us and, communicate well and all of that. But we want you to be able to answer our questions and really like pull some examples or stories from your experience that will help us understand that you have some of the qualities that we've been talking about, right? So whether we ask the candidates about their experience contributing on a team, or whether we ask about some experience you've got in the client service setting, right? We want you to not just say, I'm a team player. We want to hear an example that will convince us, right, that you've worked in a team and you've done that effectively, just by way of example.
I can remember prepping for OCIs, and I was confronted by one group of people telling me to just become really familiar with my own resume, my own experiences, so that I could speak about them comfortably. And then there was another group of people providing resources to a laundry list that's probably 1,000 questions long, and you have to have an answer ready for every one of these questions.
That is stressful.
So what would you recommend to students going into OCIs to prepare?
Well, I think it's important to understand that different firms are going to approach OCIs perhaps a bit differently. So I think that's one of the questions that you can ask as you're doing your research, over the summer, and you're kind of honing in on some of those firms that are of interest to you. Talk to students who recently went through the process with that firm, or ask me or ask the, recruiter at such and such a firm, how do you structure your OCIs? Do you ask, behavioral questions? Do you not? Because if going in, any information about how that firm approaches your OCIs will help you prepare. But I think that, the kind of work that was suggested to you, they're both good ways of, I don't think you can just prepare one way or the other, and all that preparation that you do, thinking about how to talk about your past experience by, being able to give an example, give an anecdote. If you're not asked in the OCI, then you're going to be asked during in-firms by one firm, if not the other, and, or all of them, right? You're going to have so many conversations during in-firms with different people. Some of the interviews may be longer, some of them may be 5-minute conversations, but you should be ready for anything. And just knowing yourself and your experience, it's going to be a lot less stressful for you in any interview setting if you've already kind of thought through, if I'm asked, am I a good team player, and I need to give an example of that, I've already thought through what's my best example of that.
And then you're not like flailing around trying to come up with something to say, right? You're ready.
Yeah.
You've already thought of that thing and you're very prepared, and that's going to help you come across as being a lot more confident when you're having those conversations.
And then, sorry, did you have?
No, just I would only add, like I said, I'd add two things. One is in just a very formulaic way. If it's on your resume, you need an anecdote about it, because lots of the firms use the resume as a jumping off point for all of the questions. Your interest section is like the most common place to go for those firms that still have a conversational interview style. So if you say you hella ski, you hella better have a good story about it, because someone's going to ask you. So that's key. So for every one of those points, you need, as Cheryl said, like a jumping off point and then an anecdote. And you've got to think, what's the skill that I'm trying to get across in telling this 1 minute story? And because you don't have a lot of time, you really do have to get those stories kind of down. The other thing, I mean, I can't imagine that there are 1,000 iterations of the common questions, although maybe, but there are some questions you just have to be ready for. Tell me about yourself. You have to know how to answer that. And you don't need to say, my name is Sarah, I went to school at Ottawa U. That's a given. Start somewhere that will be of interest to the interviewer. So start by saying something like, let me start by telling you about my work history, and then go into it a little bit. And that's a question where you have complete control. It's the only question, one of the only questions where you have complete control. So if you want to highlight something, get it in there.
That's a great point.
Get it in there. That's like, and like half your interviewers will ask you that question.
So it's also like less is more sometimes. Like if you can bring together a narrative and tell a story that's compelling, it almost feels better to do that and leave out some of the key details that you would get to later than to try to cover all your bases and end up sounding like ChatGPT.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
And there's such a thing as being overly rehearsed for these questions as well.
Both the tell me about yourself question, or even, you're going to prepare, your examples, have them at the ready, but be careful not to have them come out sounding like a speech that's robotic, overly rehearsed, right? You don't want that. Also be careful that you're actually listening to the question that the interviewer is asking you, because if you've got all these stories and examples at the ready, sometimes, you want the question to have been like the perfect thing so you could use the perfect example because that's the one you prepared. That's a great point too. But sometimes it's not actually answering the question the interviewer asked, and that's not good, because then it might have been a great example, but the person's like, yeah, but they didn't answer my question, which isn't good, right?
Yeah.
If they're nice, they'll give you a chance to recover and watch for that too. Like, pick up on the hints, right? If somebody says like, yeah, but what about this? They're giving you another chance, right? Ooh, maybe I missed the mark. I didn't quite, get at what they were wanting to hear from me. So, just listen is the point. You want some back and forth with your interviewers, right? You want to engage with them. You want to, make it into a conversation, even though it's an interview, right? Like, you need to listen to what they're asking you, make sure you answer, but also don't be afraid, as that's great advice from Sarah. Like, you should go in with a bit of a strategy, like, what are the most important things for this person to understand about me and why I'd be great, on their team. And the questions you're asked might not be exactly the perfect ones to let you get at that. But if you can, answer their question and say something else that allows you to kind of point to this other thing that you wanted to bring up, look for ways to do that too.
Interesting, yeah.
So go ahead.
I was just gonna say it. So I'm in the Queen's tutor program. So we're assigned a set of students to kind of like help guide through their first year of law school. So sometimes they'll reach out about interviews, especially the ones that are doing the 1L recruit. And like I think that's the number one piece of advice I've given out when I sit down and like do a mock interview with them or something. It always feels too rehearsed. And what I always say to them is don't be afraid to listen. Don't be afraid to take a second or two, digest what's been asked of you before you go back to the script. Because I think like my best guess at what you guys from this conversation and what I've learned outside is that you guys are looking for somebody who's present in the moment and who can actively respond to your questions. And like I think there's such a thing as being over prepared for an interview where like I've seen people walk in with binders. And it's like, oh, this topic, that topic, this topic. And they're like, yeah, I spent all of last night looking over this. I'm like, but what if they don't ask you in like a predicted topic? Then what are you going to do, right? So like, it just confirms what I've been telling them, like, do listen.
Okay, so once you've made it through the first wave of the application, through OCIs, you get selected for an in-firm. Is there a shift that takes place with respect to what you're looking for? Obviously, you're going to get to see these students now for a much longer period of time. It's not just 17-minute interviews. Are you looking for just generally how they conduct themselves? Is it again back to the substantive nature of their answers? And then the other thing, this is going back much longer than my own experience, but my mom, when she did the process, told me that she was later told by one of her partners that the interview process at that firm started with the secretary and how they introduced themselves. Do you think that is true nowadays with as many applicants and as many people involved in the process as it is? Will you ask the secretary what they thought?
Well, I think every interaction you have at the firm is an interaction that's part of that overall interview process, because that, like, we really set aside those 3 days, and notwithstanding what I said about client commitments before, which do have to take priority, anyone who isn't in an urgent client commitment is committed to this process. And we try to gather as much feedback from as many people as we can because we're trying to make the best possible decision. So we are trying to take as many data points as we can. And so, yeah, I would say almost every interaction matters. It matters a lot, taking the like reception example, it matters a lot to us that we are hiring people who will work well with our staff. Yeah. So if I even got a whiff of someone is being rude to a staff member, like that's, you are finished now, at least here. So certainly that's a part of it. To take just half a step back, and I'd be very curious to hear Cheryl's thoughts on this. One of the differences between the OCI process and the in-firm is the number of interviews you can do. So if a student's goal, so obviously I personally feel everyone's goal should be to work at Fasken. Setting that aside, if a student's goal is to get a big law job in Toronto, okay, that's the goal. I respect that. Apply to every big law firm on the docket. Apply to them all. When it comes to OCIs, you'll be able to do 17, I think, in a day. Like that's the number that you can take.
You could do 20.
You could do 20. Okay, so you could do 20. Although at that point, that's such a long day that you might be hurting yourself, like the quality of your interviews at that point. Yeah. But that's between you and your energy level. That's fine. You have to make decisions when you come to the in-firm. We have all heard the stories of the top candidate that stretched themselves too thin and they didn't get a job. I remember having friends like that. I remember having friends in the process who were just better than me, like just more meant to be in Toronto than I was by a long shot, and didn't get an offer because they just took too many interviews. So they were running between firms, they were mixing things up, they weren't showing any real commitment to any one firm, and by the end they weren't successful. So I would love to hear from Cheryl if she thinks there's a magic number, but you do have to get a lot more discerning, because it's possible you come out of OCI super successful and 10 firms want to interview you. You cannot do 10 firms. You'll just end up burning some of those relationships, and you might come out not successful at all. I have a thought for a number, but I'd be curious to know what.
Number?
So I don't think I could have handled on the upper end 5. I think 5 is like maybe too many. I think the ideal is more like 4. I think that's the more like 4, but like this is very personal. If you're really good at, like, if you're a high energy person and you're really good at keeping, frankly, like names and faces straight, which isn't really one of my talents, to be frank, like I will mix people up. If that's not you, if you can keep people straight and you are high energy and you know you can make it through the process, maybe you push it to 5. I personally wouldn't have been successful doing more than 4. So I don't know. Cheryl, what do you think?
I mean, five was the number I was I was gonna say. I think there are people who maybe try to do 6. Yeah. After day 1, it would be difficult to keep 6 in play. As a student, I don't know how you would do that, but.
So once the process is done, you have your crop selected. Would you say there is a common denominator? You mentioned earlier that you would think that almost every personality is represented among the 800 lawyers here. Is there a common denominator? Maybe teamwork, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there is a set of skills that we are looking for, and a set of, I guess, traits more than skills that we are looking for. And so if we have done our job well, we will have a group of students that will work well together as a team. We will have a group of students that want to help each other. We'll have a group of students who are each individually good communicators, who are organized, who want to work hard, who are resilient, and who are motivated to excel. And I would say if we had like a group of kind of traits that we're looking for, it's probably around there. Have I missed any really key ones?
No, I think those are all the ones that I would list. And even though, people who possess those traits aren't all going to have the same personalities or the same backgrounds or the same interests, like some of them are introverts, some of them are extroverts. They come from a wide variety of backgrounds. I think we want each person we hire to feel very comfortable being themselves here within these walls. And that's something that's important to us at Fasken as well. So each person will come as their authentic self and bring their authentic self to the firm. But those traits, I think just the culture of, respect for one another and wanting to, respect others and to help others be successful, not just yourself. I think that's one trait that I see amongst our students and our lawyers, because they want to help make our clients better. They want to help make their colleagues better through mentorship or through the way they work together to, land a new file or whatever it is. They want to help. We have many lawyers here who want to help make their communities better. Like they're people who care about things and about people other than themselves. They also care about themselves, and they have a real drive to be excellent, as everybody here does. That's important too. You have to have that drive to want to excel, but you also want others to excel as well.
So one thing I keep hearing from my friends who have landed in either the Bay Street Recruit or the Ottawa Recruit or any recruit, after they get their offers and they're all signed up and the excitement wears off, then what kicks in is the imposter syndrome. Did I just get lucky? Did I bluff my way this far? Do I belong there? And I might have been a kid, so that could be it, but I don't remember these two words being so popular and everywhere as they are now. So my instinct is that this is a feeling that people are feeling more than they used to. So could you say more about that? Like, is is this more prevalent now than when you guys started, for example? And also, what would you say to the students feeling this way at Fasken, other firms, just generally in life? What kind of advice would you have for that?
I mean, so it's interesting to hear you say that. I'm familiar with that terminology primarily in the context of women, because there is a significant amount of literature done around the fact that women in particular tend to what was, I think, originally coined imposter phenomenon. Yeah, I think it was the imposter phenomenon. Originally, it turned into more colloquially the imposter syndrome. And it in part has to do with this idea that like I've gotten lucky, but also that where something goes wrong, the literature tends to show that women will tend to internalize the cause, whereas men tend to see the causes elsewhere, like there were external factors that caused this mistake to happen. So I've heard it in that context. I don't know why it would be happening in a societal sense, more broadly, but I can certainly say for myself that I have experienced that. I probably still experience that from time to time, although as you build your career, you certainly do become much, much more confident as you see your successes grow. Yeah. And so just know that first of all, you're just starting out on what will hopefully be a decades-long career, whether it's in private practice or otherwise in law. And as you build those skills, you will come to realize that you are exactly where you're supposed to be. And if you're not, you'll shift. I mean, frankly, most people don't stay in private practice. There's a huge attrition rate. That's not because they can't make it or they can't cut it. Like that has nothing to do with it. It's much more that people recognize that their priorities, that their skill set, that their interests shift over time as they get older, as they gain more experience, and that other work experiences start to align better with their goals or where they are in their life or what they want to do. And so they make changes that are more appropriate for them. To me, and maybe I'm kind of flipping this a little bit, that's kind of the other side of this, is to say, set aside the thought that you're an imposter. You're not an imposter. You've done so much to get to where you are to now be saying, wow, I'm about to start this private practice law job. You're not an imposter. But there will be times when you have to decide, are my instincts telling me that I should be adjusting, that I should be making a shift? Or, and this is what I tend to counsel sort of newer lawyers to do, or is it that this is a growth opportunity? Okay, so often the times that I feel like an imposter, the times that I feel like I'm not sure if I can do it or if I'm like worthy of being here or what, are times when my skill set is being challenged. And what I have learned to do and what I encourage newer lawyers to do is when you feel that, assume it is because you are about to learn something new. You're about to learn a new skill. And you have to push through feeling like you don't know what you're doing and feeling like you're not sure to get to the other side of that. And then you will have acquired the new skill. And you won't feel like an imposter with respect to that anymore.
Yeah.
So, but that will happen. It doesn't just happen now. It will happen at various stages of your career. For me, the transition from articling to being a first-year lawyer, that was a big stretch time for me. From being sort of a mid-level associate to a senior associate, that was a stretch time for me. Becoming a partner, having a child and coming back from leave, that was a big stretch time for me. And those happen to coincide with times when we tend to lose colleagues, like we tend to have colleagues move on. And I really do, and we'll come back to the student experience, encourage people to lean into that discomfort, that feeling of I don't know what I'm doing. Work through it, work through whatever that is. If on the other side of it, you still feel uncomfortable and you still feel like you're not in the right place, talk to people, explore that. Maybe you're not in the right place. That's okay too. But you have to like really work through that discomfort to see if you're going to get to a place where, okay, now I'm on firmer ground again and I feel good about my skill set, and you can, keep moving forward.
I think a lot of that was really insightful, and it actually segues really well to speaking about mentorship, because when you're in an environment that you are comfortable to try new things, and in law, there's obviously ample opportunity to do that. Having mentors that are supporting you to learn the new things that you need to learn to do the job is invaluable. And I think that was, again, a huge part of what made me comfortable with choosing Fasken. Just right before we do go to mentorship, though, quickly, we were talking about this a little bit off camera. Does Fasken take into consideration what school you're applying from?
Well, obviously, we get applications from every law school across the country. We're very intentional about trying to build a diverse class of students. And the law schools that our students attend is part of that. We try to have a good range of representation from a lot of different law schools in our class. So you can see that across the years in the way that we've built our classes.
And then the other thing, are there any particular extracurriculars that you would say, or that you would recommend 1Ls to engage with that speak to different qualities or traits that you're hoping for your future lawyers to have?
Hand-to-hand combat. I mean, So first of all, no, there isn't one sort of set of things that we're looking for. We're looking for a set of skills. You can demonstrate those skills through all sorts of experiences. So I would say no.
There really aren't like specific one, because there's such a broad range, right? Such a broad range of opportunities available to you. First and foremost, I would say to any student, like, this is your law school experience and your education. I would always want to see you pursuing the activities and the extracurriculars that you want to pursue. And I think that, you're naturally going to seek out things that are meaningful to you, and whether that allows you to come to a firm and say, I have really diverse interests, and, I have a really well-rounded experience because I've done, a lot of different things, or whether you can say, I see myself in a particular area of law, or I see myself as a litigator, for example, and so I've been naturally drawn to, do all the moots and work in the legal clinic. Like, you're naturally going to seek out opportunities that will probably help you figure out what you want to do, or somewhat align with where you kind of see yourself. And so that's all going to make sense. And the things that you want to do, the things you want to spend your time on, are hopefully things you're passionate about. And then when you come to a firm and talk about them, like, why did you choose to spend your time on this rather than that? You're going to be able to speak about that with enthusiasm and passion. And that's really what we want to hear from you, not, you did this one thing that we were looking for students to do.
Yeah. And then on to the mentorship side of it, I think that actually is a huge part of everyone who does come to Fasken. I think that's a big part of what makes it appealing. Could you just describe how Fasken goes about ensuring that its students are paired with or have the support of different mentors at the firm?
Sure. So our 2L summer students all get 3 mentors, which is awesome, because you will not feel like, you don't have anyone to go to ask questions, or you don't know what you're doing. So everybody gets a junior mentor who's an associate who hasn't forgotten what it's like to be a student, and you get a senior mentor who is a partner. You also get a third mentor who is a partner who sits on our student development committee, and they are very concerned with overseeing your progress, the work that you're getting, the experience that you're having, giving you feedback. So all three of those people are going to be really invested and available to you. As far as like how we go about, matching people with their mentors. Number one, I've got people like beating down my door wanting to be mentors. Like I've got more people who want to be mentors than I have students I can match them up with, which is a nice problem to have. And it speaks to the kind of culture that we have here. Many of those people have benefited from mentorship, if not as a student themselves, or if they came and joined laterally, right? They've come into this place where mentorship is important, whether you're a student or an associate. So lots of people want to serve in that role. We want each student to have mentors who can help them achieve their goals. So whether that's, the mentors practice in areas that the students expressed interest in. So, those mentors are going to help to, get the student involved in their files or point them in the right direction to get that kind of experience, or you otherwise have something in common with those mentors. So we put a fair amount of work into that, and we want people to feel that they're supported by their formal mentors, but not limited to those mentors that we assign to you as well. That's quite a common experience at the firm, is that you will find informal mentor-mentee relationships through your interactions with people, whether working on files or you met them otherwise through the other activities that we include you in the firm. And so you will, find those other relationships as well that will support you.
Do you find that it's a common occurrence that someone comes to the firm as a 2L student, for example, they think that they want to do litigation, and then they end up hating litigation and loving something else? Is that a common occurrence? And then if it is, I would assume mentorship plays a role in discerning what you do want to do for your career, but how do you go about shaping their career progression?
So
answer that one?
Yes, I'd say it's more common than not, actually, particularly at the 2L level. One of the reasons we have a non-rotational summer program is so that students can try every kind of area of law that they would like to try. Because the practice, particularly in the corporate area, is very different from the study. In litigation, it lines up a little bit better, although the day-to-day, the pacing, the team, that's something you have to experience to really know, is that what I want? But corporate, there's really no way to experience a transaction in law school such that you would know, okay, this is, again, the kind of pacing, the kind of team, the kind of work that I will enjoy. So it's not uncommon at all for people to want to shift. Mentors play a huge part. Cheryl and her team play a huge part. Cheryl does check-ins with all of our students very regularly to see, how is it going? Do you like it? Do you want more of this work? Do you want to try something different? And we really do what we can to accommodate those shifting interests. It is one of, and I'll take my Fasken hat off temporarily, it is one of the just advantages of being at a full service law firm, is you're going to come in and be able to try multiple things and actually see if the day-to-day practice aligns with what your expectations of it were going to be.
Yeah. I mean, I was just reflecting on my experiences at my firm, and it's a full service firm, and I have one of my tutees was offered a position as an in-house summer student. And at first I was like, she said she valued work-life balance. And I was like, in-house, work-life balance, all I know is those two things go together. So you should probably take it. But then I was thinking, like, how blessed was I to see all the kinds of different files over that summer, and to very quickly realize, like, I don't really like family law. I thought I would. Right. I like civil litigation. Still litigation heavy, but it's different. Right. Pretty different. And I don't like, what if I ended up in a place where I only had one kind of law to practice?
then maybe I would have just hated law in general, and like been like, why did I go to law school, and all those emotions, right? So I do think that is, like, for me at least, was a huge advantage to be able to get that exposure.
Yeah, I think it's very advantageous when it comes to determining what you will enjoy. It also provides a great foundation because, if a student does decide to go from private practice, or maybe being at a full service law firm, to going to a boutique firm, or practicing on their own, or being in-house, the foundation of having seen lots of different practice areas will be so helpful, because you have to be able to issue spot across practices. When a client brings you a problem, they will think they have one kind of problem, when what they really have is a tax issue and a labor issue and a corporate issue, and they might need IP advice, and you've got to help them spot all of those. And if you've never seen them, that's really hard. So I think it makes for a better lawyer to have a broad experience at first. It's one of the reasons we encourage our students to take work from all different areas. It's in part to help them determine, where do you feel like your talents line up with our team, but it's also so that you will just have a bigger, stronger foundation to stand on when you specialize later on.
Yeah. How did you come to personally discern what you wanted to do? Or how would you recommend students do that? Obviously, being non-rotational, they'll be exposed to it, but is there anything beyond that you think was helpful for you?
So I think, number one, this is going to sound a little cliche, but stay with me. You have to have an open mind as you go into different work assignments. So there was, because I am a normal human being, there was no part of me that thought, oh, I'm going to be a real estate litigator with a municipal law specialty. Obviously, like, what? No one dreams of that as a little girl, okay? But when I articled, there was a really big municipal law project. So I'm gonna date myself real bad now, but if anyone would like to Google the words liberal gas plant scandal, this back in 2009, TransCanada Pipeline was the winning bidder to build a gas plant in Oakville, where the Ford site is off the highway. Okay. Oakville was a swing seat in an election year for the Liberals. But before anyone knew about how politically charged this was going to be, we were the municipal lawyers for TransCanada. And this was a huge, like an unusually large, high profile municipal case where we were going to what was then the Ontario Municipal Board to fight something called an interim control bylaw, none of which are things anyone needs to know, but it was exciting. I loved the area of law. I loved the academic portion of it. I liked the concept. I loved the team. And the long nights ended up being kind of exciting because I liked the team and there was a political element to it. And because I kept an open mind and I did this project, I then realized, wow, this brings together a bunch of things I enjoy. I had come in thinking I wanted to be a commercial litigator. That, as it turned out, didn't actually play as well to my skill set as having a slightly more specialized practice would. I came into this and realized this lets me be a little bit academic. It lets me be a litigator. It lets me be an advocate. I can still do some of the municipal stuff that I liked from my past career. It was perfect. But this was a weird assignment and one that I would not have sought out, and one that if I were not at a giant law firm, I would never have been introduced to. So it's about keeping an open mind, trying lots of different things. Like, you have to come in with a very yes mindset. And if you do, you will discover the thing that fits really well for you. And because of that, like, I have a career that you could not rip from my cold dead hands. Like, I love the career that I have, but it really required me putting together pieces to make a career that really lined up with my aptitudes and also like didn't play on my weaknesses and worked with my personality and did all of that stuff. Full service experience, that helps you figure that out.
I think in our position, hearing someone speak so positively about their time at a full service firm is probably the most exciting thing that we could hear. You mentioned that and obviously you couldn't ever have dreamt that this is what you would end up doing. What did you dream of, and how does this compare to that?
Okay, so this is going to shock you. So hold on. So just hold on to your podcast.
Okay.
I like hearing my own voice. I know. So I knew, Cheryl, I knew I wanted to litigate. I like problem solving. I like puzzles.
From how early on?
Too early.
Okay.
So I was pretty darn sure that I wanted to advocate.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the first experience that I had as a summer student, we were representing an insurance company. It was a personal injury matter in which a worker had been killed at work. And I won't give you the grisly details, but it wasn't pretty. Mm-hmm. And the lawyer was doing an examination for discovery of the widow. And our lawyer was as professional as one could possibly be, but it was terrible. Like to see that, to have to ask this woman questions after her husband just died. Mm-hmm. I walked out of that experience, so I'm never doing that again. So that just sort of shoved, and there are people who, like, that is an important job. It's like family law. You have to have phenomenal family law lawyers. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't do it well. I would be frustrated. I'd burn out. I wouldn't do it well. My passion's not there. Same with, you have to have phenomenal lawyers at the criminal bar. That is super important. I wouldn't do it well. It turned out that type of civil litigation, it wasn't for me. So I said, okay, well, I want to be a litigator, but if that's not for me, what do I do now? And then I did start to look for more specialized areas where I could really kind of be entrenched in kind of the academics of the law. And there was no risk anybody was going to die. Like that started to matter to me. Yeah. You really, I think, have to think about your own kind of personality, among other things, when you come into a career like this. Like litigation has winners and losers. Mm-hmm. It sucks to lose. I am competitive enough that I like it enough that I can tolerate the losing times, because the winning times are great. But if that's not for you, if you're not competitive, think about that. Like, think about whether you want to live in a career where you have a goal and there's a bunch of goalies everywhere. Like, that's what litigation is. Yeah. Or do you want to be in a career where everybody's swimming in the same direction? You've got slightly different priorities. Sometimes you're getting kind of shoved to one side or another, but you're all trying to make the same thing happen. In litigation, you're trying to make opposite things happen. That's a fundamental sort of personality question. I knew enough about myself to know I wanted to problem solve, I wanted to advocate, I wanted to litigate, but I didn't know anything about the subject matter that I would do well in. And that's something that I'm very thankful to the firm for letting me find, because otherwise I wouldn't have figured that out.
I think hearing the positive testimonies from lawyers working on Bay Street is super valuable, because I think way too often you get people who aren't working on Bay Street who almost try to drag it in a way, when frankly nearly everyone who I've spoken with who actually does this profession seems to speak about a really high quality of life and everything like that. So I think it's really good to get the other side of it, because I think it's way too prevalent that people are saying, oh, you'll work too much and you won't really enjoy yourself and all the rest of that, when I think if you are enjoying the work that you're doing, it can be fun.
Oh, for sure. I mean, so I think, and again, this is something that I talk to our newer lawyers about. This career is fabulous, but it takes an investment. It takes an investment. Like when you article, that is a sprint.
Yeah.
And you cannot measure your whole career, which is much more like a marathon, against what it was like to sprint through articling. And when you're in first and second year and third year, that's hard for different reasons. You have very little control over the work that you're doing and when it comes in and how it comes in and who you're reporting to. But that will change.
Yeah.
And if you're willing, again, to invest that time and work hard and push through, and it's not all bad, just to be clear at those beginning stages, but it's hard, then you end up where I am, where I have way more client control and I have more control of the people I surround myself by.
Yeah.
Do I have complete control? No. Emergencies sometimes happen. I get frustrated sometimes. But overall, I have like a phenomenal life because I'm able to do this.
Back to the recruit side of things, do you see a difference in the caliber of student nowadays versus before, or even in, are there different trends, like things that you see that are recurrent now with applicants that weren't really there before? Or
Well, Cheryl, I was a student that did work for you back when you were a litigation
She set the bar really high, let me tell you. Oh yeah, you always like to bring up how exciting that file was too.
It was dreadful.
We worked on a file that had to do with a piece of farm machinery. Yeah, that was a good one. I think, I've heard a lot of different lawyers say, when they see the student applications through the recruit, they'll say, geez, how did I get hired here? They're just impressive, very, very impressive. And I'm sure since the beginning of time, there have been impressive people, apply to firms, but certainly the caliber of applicants that we see is very, very high. I think that the process has changed a lot since we went through it in terms of like how invested students are in the process and like the stuff that you guys do to really try to put your best foot forward. And so we see that come across. Like students are very savvy. They're out there, trying to, meet people, gather all the information, attending the workshop to figure out how to, write a good cover letter, like all the things, right? And so the quality of the applications and then just the accomplishments of the applicants impress us every single year. Yeah.
is there a common mistake that you would advise applicants to try to avoid, or more than one mistake even?
Probably a bunch of them. As someone who reads a heck of a lot of applications, one thing that's kind of crystallized in my mind over the last few years is that I think it's a mistake for a cover letter to leave the reader with the impression that there's a lot of stuff that we as a firm can do for you without balancing that with a sense of what you as a future employee can do for us. And so that what I mean by that is I think it's great if you've done all your research and you love that firm's student program and you like that you're going to get this and it's going to give you the opportunity to do that and this is what the firm can give to me. But we're trying to hire people and we love that. We want to hear that. But it has to go hand in hand with selling yourself as a candidate and what value you can bring to the firm. So it can't all be about what we're going to do for you. And like sometimes there's not enough of a balance there in the cover letter in that way. You got to sell yourself as a candidate and, why should we hire you? What sets you apart? What are you going to be able to bring to our teams? So there's that. I don't know. Do you have one that...
I mean, we touched on it briefly, which is in the in firms, you just don't stretch yourself too thin. You are going to have to be selective about the firms that you do in firms with. You heard us talk about the kinds of, like the number of interviews, but it's because if you are doing well in the process, you will be asked to come back to that firm multiple times. And if you can't, because you are committed to another firm, that makes it difficult. They're not going to have enough exposure to you. So you do have to get pretty discerning fairly early in the process. That's one thing. With respect to cover letters and resumes, this is going to sound really obvious, but every year I will get a cover letter that is either addressed to the wrong person. So it's addressed to like the student director at another firm, even though it's addressed to Fasken. Or it'll have a spelling error in it, it'll have a grammatical error in it. And when you are reviewing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of resumes, like it becomes difficult to overlook that. Yeah. I understand you're putting together maybe 30 applications. That's a lot. You've got to just like recruit a parent, a friend, a somebody to double check everything for you. One, because it is pretty hyper competitive at that level. Mm-hmm. But also because as a substantive matter, your first few years of practice, you're not bringing the subject matter expertise to the table, right? You're fresh out of law school. There's a big client matter. There's a big litigation dispute. It's the partner that's coming in most of the time with the strategy and the like, this is the direction we're going to go. You're going to contribute to that, but you're not necessarily in the thought leader position yet. You are there to be precise. And your work has to be precise. If you say you've researched the point and you've run it to ground, I'm going to rely on that. And I need to know I can rely on you. If I need you to draft something for me, I may not be able to double check it because we don't have time. Things are moving quickly. I need to know that it's going to be polished. And so the first piece of essentially work you give the firm has an error in it. It's very hard for us to overlook that. So like get everybody and their mother and their dentist's nephew to read your application for you.
Yeah.
The other thing is if we select your application to move on in the application process and you know, if your resume is not polished and error-free, many people in the firm are going to see that document. You know, every lawyer who's going to meet with you, and there could be many of them, and they could be senior leaders in the firm, are going to look at that same document, and that reflects on us as well, right? We've selected this candidate out of many candidates, right, to move forward in this process. So, you know, you have to keep in mind that it's not just going to be seen at that initial stage to get the OCI. That's your paper. That's your document. Yeah. That if we hire you, I'm going to show that resume to one of our clients to set up a secondment, because we set up amazing secondment experiences for all of our 2Ls with clients. I got to be able to show that document to a client. So, you know, you really want to put the effort into making it polish.
So follow up on the resume question, very controversial. Should we stick with one page, and even if it means leaving stuff out, or is more than one page okay?
So 2 pages, but it can't go over 2 pages. Like it's a 2-page limit, fill it. Like because you're trying to express transferable skills, you want to make sure under every experience you are describing transferable skills. And shameless plug for our website, but also very helpful. We have resume material on our website. So if you, Cheryl, can describe where to find it, but these are real cover letters and real resumes that we've scrubbed the names from of our actual lawyers who got jobs. So these are successful. That will show you the template, the formula. Don't stray from it. It's your content, but like that's the way to present it.
It should be 2 pages. I think that that's very standard in this recruit, and 1 page is, I think 1 page is difficult to do well. And if 2 pages is expected in the standard, why wouldn't you use all that space. So I would say definitely 2 pages, and your cover letter should not be more than 1 page.
Are there any? Do you have any favorite interests that stood out to you on the resumes over the years?
Favorite interests.
So I love the interest section. We don't tend to get to it in our OCI process just because we don't have a completely conversational OCI, but absolutely we tend to get to it at the in-firm. I mean, anything that is a conversation starter. So I have had, so first of all, if you did anything at an elite level, that is going to be of interest to people. Mm-hmm. And that tends to spark discussion. Cooking, reading, like things that a lot of people would also have some basic knowledge of. That tends to be of interest because, I may not be able to talk about lacrosse, but almost everyone can talk about like a favorite cookbook or a favorite, like some interest that kind of unites a lot of people. Those are ones that that tend to be good springboards for really good conversations. But honestly, it's super important that interest section is very genuine because it tends to be a springboard for conversation. You can tell when someone has put something in kind of just to put it in. And when someone has a really authentic passion for something, it's so pleasant to talk to them about it. So it's just advantageous if you have, genuine interest in that interest section.
And then I guess we can end it with, do you have any final advice for anyone applying in the upcoming recruit? If there was any short form advice that you would say, whether it be with respect to staying calm and confident or specific advice for a resume, is there anything that stands out to you?
I mean, there's lots of advice we can give. I think overall, I would just tell students to do your best, put the work in to do your best, but also know that, it is a very competitive process. And as you've heard us talk about today, it is very difficult in part because of the large number of candidates who participate in the process. So I don't want candidates who put in the work and put their best foot forward and are genuinely excellent candidates, but for whatever reason, come out of the 2L recruit without a job to think that that's the end of the world, because it really isn't. And I think that by viewing it that way, candidates tend to put way more pressure on themselves than is necessary, and that can impact how they perform in the recruit. I think be yourself. Be confident in, who you are and what you have to offer. It is enough. And if you don't end up with the job at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that you're not enough. Things are going to work out for you, but try not to put so much pressure on yourself that it's make it or break it. My whole career rides on this. That in and of itself is going to affect your anxiety levels. I know it's easy for me to say, although I've been through it, so I guess I can say. And also, be true to yourself and what you really want to do, like the kind of work that really appeals to you, the kind of environment that really appeals to you. I think it's very easy to get caught up in all of the discussion and everybody's, anxieties are riding high, and it's just almost impossible not to listen to the chatter about, well, everybody's doing the Toronto recruit. Everybody wants this top firm or that top firm, right? And so what's wrong with me if I should want that too, right? And if I don't want that, then what's wrong with me? Everybody seems to know what they're talking about. And you can suddenly get caught up in this wave, right? Where you're not really listening to yourself. And so, like I said before, do your preparation, do your research, talk to as many people as you can, and just try to drown out the noise and just focus on yourself, what you have to offer, and what it is you think you really want. Yeah. And stick with that.
I can't possibly top that.
That was terrific. I guess as we wrap up here, thank you to both of you. This was the episode that I know both of us have looked forward to since the recruit ended. So yeah, this is amazing. Thank you both so much for your time.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank
for inviting
you.
us.
Yeah,
That was
that's awesome.
fun. Thank you.
Yeah.